All right, welcome. This is Myodynamics 1, week 2. I think we're ready to start. Everybody's looking good in the classroom. You know the rules. Raise your hand if you have questions. Please ask me questions. All right. If I don't answer right away, then just jump in, unmute your mic, and let me know. All right. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start so we don't lose any time. Perfect. All right. So week 2. So last week we spent the entire class talking about particle emission. I know that there's still some issues out there, okay, with the emission. It's normal. Remember, this is week 1 out of 36 weeks that we're going to be talking about dynamics in Maya only, so it's going to be a long way. So no need to worry, everything is going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. Before we actually dive into the class, let's just talk a little bit about the assignment, all right? For that, I'm going to, let me just locate my project. So what we're going to do, which is slightly different than what I usually do with, what I used to do with my previous levels, is that we're going to have just the one main assignment in this term to be able to guarantee or at least get a stronger chance of finishing this thing. Previously, the students, I understand some of them are very busy with their work, and it took a while to get some of the guys to get their stuff rendered on time. So we're going to do things slightly different this time. We're going to start right from the very beginning with the assignment, okay? So, on the FTP, those of you who remember, who watching the recording, I mean, those of you in the live classroom, you have everything you need. You know the details of the FTP, so you're good to go. Remember, please keep those details to yourself because, it's part of the donation service system. So, but for those of you watching the recordings that have also donated to the FTP, to what is called the content supporter, then you know what to do. Go into the FTP. For Myodynamics level 1, you will see that inside of that folder, you will have a war assignment folder. We're going to go in there, and inside of that folder, you have what is called, we have a renders folder, we have a word plate, and we have a PDF file, okay? Download everything, of course. Unzip your wordplate.rar. Actually, I should do the same myself. It's a couple of hundred megs, so I'm going to do it after the class so we don't interfere. But you guys go ahead and download it, unzip it, and it's basically going to be a Maya project file which has a Maya scene with animation, a camera. I'm gonna load it myself. I just don't want to download it while I'm teaching, just in case. But yeah, you're going to have everything you need to start. Okay, remember, this is going to be the one assignment for this course. So you have 11 weeks to complete, but there's a lot of stuff to do. Okay, we need to make a decision for those of you taking the courses live. If you guys want to work in teams, maybe in pairs, or share the load. I don't know. We'll see. Or if you want to do it individually, it's up to you guys. So go ahead and download this file. Those of you watching the recording that didn't donate to the content supporter package, I've been getting a lot of emails this week about this thing. About the campaign. Some people thought that the campaign is over, but it's not really over. I keep posting on Facebook the link, so you can still upgrade your donation if you donated for a lower level, meaning the 5 or the 25 or even the 50, and you want to upgrade your donation. It's not a problem. You can just go ahead and run it, do another donation here, contribute, and upgrade yourself. Send me an email with the 2 receipts, and I will bump you up. Meaning that those of you who want to get access to these files that we're going to start sharing this week, and every week for that matter, then you can make sure that you donate it to this package, and you're going to get access to the FTP server and everything, okay? So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a quick peek. But basically what I'm doing is here, and I'm giving you a PDF as a reference, okay? The reference is from Save It Private Ryan. I'm going to maybe see if I can switch to this, make sure that everything is fine. Julius, I did send you, I talked to you afterwards, but I did send you an email with the FTP details like everybody else. You just need to look into your email. We'll talk about it later. I'm just going to quickly take a peek at this. Okay, so now Rodrigo, everybody's here. Perfect. So, okay. So what I did is I took some snapshots from Save It Private Ryan, especially from the opening scene from Normandy, okay, the D-Day scenario. And I kind of took a few snapshots and I lined them up here for you guys to kind of show you the kind of elements that can be done with the information that we're going to cover in level 1. Okay. We created for you already a layout, like I was saying, a geometry that kind of it's a good place to start. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can do your own, of course. But it's a good place to start playing with these elements. Okay. And the idea is over the weeks, I'm going to be giving you tools and tips to be able to replicate certain kind of effects, like for example the blood splatter over here. Certain types of fire. This is not necessarily hyper-realistic fire because we're going to be looking at that on level 2. But certain levels of fire can really be achieved with information from level 1, especially this kind of blood splashes, let's call it, splats. This kind of broken glass and stuff in the air. Particularly, this is very, very important. It's called the mortar hits, okay? And we're going to be working on the different ideas of how to achieve these effects in a flexible way where you can just create a bit of a dynamic setup that can be placed in your scene, and depending on the distance from the camera, what kind of elements you're going to be using. So it's going to be interesting. Okay, so there, for example, the difference between this impact and this impact over here, it could be generated with the same system, just with different settings to accommodate for the distance from the camera. All right. A variation of the same system can be actually creating this kind of more clumps of sand looking of impacts, machine gun fire, what we call the muzzle flashes. Okay. Rain, very important. We're going to do rain probably starting today or next week. Different types of rain: close-up, mid-ground, background rain. So this kind of elements over here, you can see the different types of, even though it's rain, it's very different approaches depending on the distance from the camera. Okay, so I'm going to be teaching you a little bit of how to think in those ways, how to dissect your shot and plan ahead. Okay, for the kind of stuff that you're going to be needing to do. Little drips. Okay, like stuff kind of coming off the helmet, where you don't necessarily have to be using real flow. You don't have to be using end particles for something as simple as that. I'm not saying that those drips and some of the things that I'm showing you have been done with visual effects or in 3D for that matter, but I'm telling you that if you had to work on an animated short film or an animated feature, or for example you had a background armies of computer guys back there, you could still do these kind of elements. Okay. No problem there. Okay, so let's continue. Different types of motor hits. Okay, more of a sideways. And the reason I'm putting this one here is that if you, sorry, microphone issues. Please mute your microphone, guys, so we don't have this kind of jumps in the recording. Let me pause the recording for a second because I think someone's having problems with hearing things. So I'm gonna pause for a minute. Bit of a hiccup there, and I just realized, thanks to Julius, that I wasn't really sharing my screen, so I was talking for a couple of minutes I'm not talking about myself, but I was just showing you nothing. So quickly, I'm gonna go back here and just kind of go over the pictures. Okay, so bubbles, bullet trails underwater, blood. Okay, this kind of stuff. My idea, okay, is for these courses is to teach you how to see this type of impacts or elements from an FXTD point of view, right? So if you analyze this image on its own with a regular audience eye, then this is normal, right? This is just a bullet trail, a couple of guys get hit with bullets underwater, done. But you as an FXTD, you always have to try to dissect it. And yeah, the magic of some films, especially the ones you work on, is going to go away. The more that you learn with me how things are done, you either two things are going to happen. One of two things are going to happen probably. You're going to either fall in love with what we do, and that's it. You're done, and you're hooked. Or the second thing will be, now that you know how some of these shots are done and some of these effects are done, then the magic is gone, and you'll probably be a bit disappointed even. It could happen. So from a FXTD point of view, a bullet trail underwater can be done in a very similar way as a missile trail. Okay, it's just a sense of scale that matters to me. So if you were able to cut this out and put it in a bigger scale on a big movie screen and render it differently, it could mean something else. Okay, so it's just about the technique of how to put particles on the screen and how to move them, that it will become your kind of workflow from now on. Okay, so a bullet trail it can be other things. So the principles of emission, the principle of dynamics of something like this, it can be applied for many other types of effects. And it's something to remember in this course. I'm not teaching you how to do just one exact type of effect. I want you to see what I do and hear what I say, and get more of the procedures and the reasoning behind it in order for you to modify it and apply it in other things. That's why this kind of assignments like this, there's so many types of elements, are going to be very helpful for you. Okay. Same thing with this kind of elements over here. This guy is getting hit with a bullet underwater, but if I were to isolate this section, okay, just the actual element itself, this could be an explosion, this could be a cloud, depends on the motion of it. But as if I just by analyzing this image right here like this could be many other things. Okay, so it's just a matter of how do we get particles to describe this shape to look the way they look. Although I don't tend to focus too much on rendering on my courses, because ideally, okay, in a big studio, FXTDs do some rendering, but it's just sometimes, okay, depends on the studio. You do rendering that is just for testing, just for kind of selling your effect to the supervisors, and sometimes, depending on the type of effect as well, it tends to go to the lighting department, so you're not really going to spend. I'd rather you guys to be really experts on particle dynamics, and then we'll see what we can do with the rendering afterwards, okay? It's very, very common scenario. Especially now, there's 100 different types of rendering engines. There is many plugins for rendering effects. So, you know, this could go on forever, where I prefer you guys to be able to master how to move particles and fluids on the scenes, okay? So anyway, this is the kind of elements that I was showing, some of this Canon stuff, some fire, like I was saying before. I was just talking on a blank screen. These kinds of plumes of smoke, for example. The first time you look at this and you will say, well, how come this is level 1? This has to be done with Maya fluids. Not necessarily, okay? It depends. It depends on the way it moves, depends on how close it is to the camera. It definitely, you know, you could achieve something like this with different techniques, okay? Maybe this picture shouldn't be here because this is a bit too much, but hey, you know, I welcome the challenge. Bits of fire. I was talking about the blood. Okay, this guy getting hit in the head and blood splattering around. You don't really need fluid simulation for that. I was talking about this as well. This will be achieved with blobby particles by us, no problem. Breaking glass, and I was talking about these mortar hits. That's the kind of stuff that I was trying to show you earlier. So this kind of impacts, where one system, okay, one event that has multiple passes, okay, multiple particle systems, multiple, you know, elements within this event will describe this mortar hit. And based on a few tweaks, you can probably do something a bit more close up, something that has probably no so powdery sand, but more of a water-based, more clumpy kind of sand. All this should come from one setup. Muzzle flashes, what we tend to call these things. Then I was talking about the rain, so close-up rain, mid-ground, background, water dripping off the helmets, okay, really close-up stuff, different techniques or different variations of one technique to do some of these things. I was talking about the drips coming off the helmets, and I'm sorry about that again. I was saying that, you know, this guy, definitely that rain is real, of course, but you could do the same thing on CG without using a SPH solver or flip solver. It depends on the proximity to the camera is key. That's probably the first question we usually ask when you get a new shot. It's how close is this thing to the camera, because that's going to tell you exactly how much time and how much money you should put into these things. I was talking about this kind of stuff. Okay, so this element, for example, here, we know that it's a mortar hit, some sort of explosion happening on the right side. But if you were to cut it, okay, if you were to cut this section here and rotate it, okay, I don't think I can do that in the software, in PDF, but if you were to rotate it and put it, you know, vertical, straight vertical, and render it differently and scale it down a lot, this could look like a splash. It could look like a splash. Again, the dynamics of this is what matters to me. You see, about the rendering is a more relative thing. It's about the dynamics. Describing this kind of crown shape with these variations is the trick. This, for example, let me see if in this image. Well, this image here has the guy getting, you know, dead guy over there getting hit by bullets, so more blood is coming up. But there is an image coming up next, this one that has sparks coming off the helmet. So one thing that we're going to work on this course as well is doing a little bit of a machine gun setup that, based on where the bullets or the particles coming off that machine gun are, depending on the surface that is hitting, different types of events will be triggered. Okay, so if it hits sand, we'll do a bit of a squib or a sand kind of hit. If it hits metal, we're going to probably try to do some sparks. If it hits flesh, you could do blood. Okay, so that's something a bit more complicated we're going to do in a couple of weeks, but we're going to start very soon with this kind of stuff, all right? So today I'm talking more about the assignment just to get your mind of what's coming to you. Okay, well then we have also the reverse angle, which I'm not 100% sure if it is on the file that is on the FTP. It depends on if we have enough time. We do have a camera pointing that way. But the idea behind that is that by all means, we're not trying to do a realistic ocean. That's why we have a real flow course. But you can still do something similar to water, okay? So to do some of this water surface. And this is more for probably looking at the, again, elements that were happening really close to the camera from the different angle. From this angle, they're further away. So your setups have to be flexible to be able to adjust to that kind of stuff. Again, I was showing you here. So this is a splash, and this is kind of the same idea of what I was showing you earlier with the motor hit. You can see that if I were to then do the reverse, if I were to crop this thing out, this element, rotate it, put it in this angle, point in this way, scale it up, and render it as dust, it will look like a motor hit. Okay? Yes, there are certain variations, of course. I know people are going to be like, no, but this is water dynamics, there's surface tension. I know all that. I'm just talking about the more general idea of particles emitting in a crown shape and falling through due to gravity, dying on collisions. So, the core concepts definitely can be applied. Different proximities, okay, so something a bit more close up, something a bit further away, and then, obviously stuff back there, okay? So this is for your inspiration. I think having inspiration is, for me, is the key of those things. And it happens, I don't know, it probably happens to you guys too, or it will start to happen soon. When you feel a bit blue about your work and you kind of too stressed out and exhausted and you kind of start doubting things, watch a movie. Watch a movie with some sort of effects. Watch something, go to the cinema, or I'm a Blu-ray collector. I have hundreds of those, and put something there, watch something, and you will see how, if this is really your passion, this is really what you do, is going to come back to you. Okay, so have these images around, look at them, and get excited, because it's definitely cool. So the assignment done. Download the files. Okay, Julius, I'll deal with you after the class, tonight, because I have 4 classes in a row. But the FTP details should be on your email, as I email everybody who donated correctly. Okay, so let's go to Maya now and continue. So last week we did emission. I don't want to talk too much more about emission, but there's a couple of things that are missing, of course. Let me see what I have in my folder here for you guys. But today is going to be probably more about particles, okay, just attributes relating to the particles. A couple of things that we can do is probably, before we jump into that, I'm missing a couple of attributes, a couple of things that we didn't talk about before. So what I'm going to do very quickly, because I'll do it quickly now, because we're going to be using it in every class. So I can have a more detailed explanation as the weeks go by. But for surface emission, okay, we talked about most things, but one very important thing missing, and it's something that you can add to your current assignment, okay, just to kind of spice it up a little. So far, okay, I'm not going to go to the community because it's going to take too much time off the class, but I see that very successful results from this week's, you guys really grasp the concept, everything seems to be making sense. But you notice in yourself as well that a lot of this emission that you have, for example, of the tree surface itself, is everywhere on the surface, okay? Yes, you could cut branches and you could, but at the end of the day, this is the entire surface that is emitting particles, okay? There are ways, of course, to vary that, and it's using textures, okay? So that's a very, very important thing. I'm going to go briefly over it. I'm going to show you a couple of things, and I'm going to start blending to the particle conversation. And then we're going to be using it in every class, I think in every single class, so we're going to be fine, okay? So I'm going to basically replicate what we did last week very quickly. I'm just going to emit from this object. I'm not going to stop too much, especially now that you guys have recordings. We're going to call this whatever, plane, surface, emission, create. Like I said, you guys have the recording, so if something you don't really remember, I'm not skipping over new content, I'm skipping over old content. So there we go, we got the particles being emitted off this plane. And what I'm going to do for the sake of this example is I'm going to get rid of the velocity, okay, the speed. I'm going to leave those guys, I want them to stay where they're born, okay? So go ahead and find the speed, set the number to 0, we're done. So On the emitter itself, right now we have, of course, as you know, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my polygon. So we focus on the particles themselves. I think I increased the rate already to a reason. No, I didn't. So let's get some real particles out there. And let's go ahead and hit play, and we end up with this. Let me go to wireframe so you guys can see better. You've seen this before, nothing special. But what I haven't taught you, maybe you know because you already been playing with particles, but some of you don't, is that you can go ahead and use a texture to describe the area where these particles are going to be born. Okay, that's actually called texture emission. Okay, in Maya, and it's done on the emitter at the very, very bottom on the attribute editor. Okay, this is not something that is going to be done through the channel box like I usually work. It's going to be on the attribute editor at the very, very bottom. You have something called texture rate, and you can see that, you know, given the name, you can plug a texture. You can plug any texture, either a procedural texture or something that you paint yourself. For the sake of the class, I'm going to start with something simple, such as a ramp. Okay, and let's quickly talk about this. Okay, texture emission. The texture itself, okay, is going to become a multiplier of the rate that you already have in your emitter. So if it's a multiplier, the logic tells me that it should be some sort of number, right, from 0 to something. So, for example, having a color picture is not really the best way to go, because Maya, you know, I would rather have a black and white image that I know for sure that which values I'm using. In something like this, Maya is going to convert it to a black and white picture. So I don't know. I personally prefer to work with a black and white image. It's not a problem. What I'm going to do is switch this ramp to, let's say, something. You know what? I'm going to change this texture for now. This is not the best way to show you what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to use it just a checker. Let's just get rid of this texture. I don't really need it. Let's go ahead and make actually a checker. So I'm going to show you two ways. You saw already that I clicked on this and I made a texture using this button here, just the map button. But you can also do it the other way. You can also go into Maya here and just create, for example, a checker. So where's my checker? There we go. Perfect. And this is obviously not connected to the emitter yet. But what I'm going to do is just select my emitter to organize my screen a little better, and just middle mouse. Okay, middle mouse click and drag and drop it on top of this. You can see the connection has been made. So there's the two ways you can actually do this. What I personally like to do, and I will strongly advise you to do this, is to apply the same texture to the geometry. It's not necessary. Okay, but what I like to do this because I have a way to visualize what this texture is actually doing on my emission. So I think the easiest way will be just to grab in, just grab the texture and just drag it down here to the working area, and then just plug that in there, the same texture, plug it onto the Lambert 1 in this case, to the color. That way I can go to the texture mode. Okay, so I have a representation here of my texture, and I know what the emitter is actually going to do. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that if I need to modify this texture, I can actually see what's happening, what's going on here. I'm not going to do it right now, but you know, if you wanted to reduce the amount of squares and things like that, okay, it's very, very helpful this way. At least while you get used to these things. By default, okay, if you drop the image onto the emitter, onto the texture emission, that on itself is not going to be enough to activate this feature. Okay, so if you go in and hit play again, hopefully you can see. Just go like that. You can see that the particles are just being emitting in the exact same pattern as before. Nothing special. What you need to do is just go back in and then activate the actual thing. Okay, so ideally I would have preferred if you drop the texture, automatically checks it on for you, but something to remember. If it doesn't happen, it's because you're missing this enable button. Okay, so you basically have the feature there, but you haven't turned it on. Click on the checkbox enable texture rate. You will see the difference now where my particles, if I let them play long enough, I'm probably going to increase my rate in a second to make this thing faster for us. But you can see very quickly how the pattern that these particles are achieving is matching the texture. How do I know? Because now I have it assigned to the map, to the texture itself, and I can see that. Okay, let me just switch between 4 and 6. Okay, you can see now what's going on. Default behavior, okay, again, is from emitting from the white color, because I was saying is a multiplier. Okay, so white is 1, or any, is a positive value, where black will account for 0. So if you're multiplying the rate by that image, then by default you get this behavior. If you want to swap it, okay, if you want to invert that, you can just easily just click on emit from dark, and that is basically inverting their effect. So keep an eye on this image, remember, so it was starting with an empty spot. If we rewind and hit play, then obviously we get the inverse. Okay, I'm going to increase this rate so we don't wait so long for these things to fill up. Okay, so a bit of a high rate. Very quickly you can see this thing works. Very powerful, very useful thing. And obviously maybe not with a checker, but you will see over the classes that we're going to be using this very often. Advantages, of course, is doesn't have to be, if you don't want to, doesn't have to be a static texture. It can be an animated texture. So this is very common to use it on well, many types of effects. But if you're doing natural phenomena, we're going to do next week probably an assignment with doing rain. We're going to start doing rain together. We're going to be using an animated texture to get more organic patterns, okay, of emission. So something to keep in mind, something to try. Animated textures, I don't need to explain too much. We're going to use some in class, so I go for it. But if you want to animate any of these values to make this texture change over time, then you will see the difference, the change in there. You can also, okay, well, I'm going to show you with a different example. So this is as far as it goes for the emission. That's one thing I was missing. No, sorry, I'm missing one more thing. I was missing these two attributes over here, min and max distance. Okay, I think I kind of threw I like to do that, okay, with you guys. Obviously the classes have an ending time and I run out of time to say things, but some things I tend to leave out by, on purpose, and I either mention them in the next class or I see what you guys do through the community. So I know, for example, I think it was Neil, I gave him a bit of a tip how to play with a min and max distance to give himself a bit of thickness on some of his elements. So I go to the community, I see what you guys are doing, and I tend to give you a bit of extra challenges here and there. So one attribute we didn't talk about is the min and max distance. At the moment, you can see that these particles are being born obviously off the surface. I remove the speed value, so the things are not moving at all. So wherever they're born, they stay. But there is a way to actually emit with some sort of thickness. Okay, so using the surface normal in order for you to place clumps of particles. So this example is going to be actually pretty cool to use this number. So min distance and max distance. Simple is from the surface, okay, from the actual surface itself on the direction of the normal in units in Maya. Okay, so that distance is where you're going to be placing particles. So if you keep it at 0, 0, it's going to be particles are going to be emitted right on the edge of that surface, on top of that surface. But if I were to increase, for example, my max distance from a value of 0 to a value of 1, just simple. Just remember, these are Maya units. So if I were to show you my grid, it's going to be make perfect sense. I'm going to rewind. I'm going to hit play. Okay, very simple. With the cool thing is, if we go to perspective view, because we're combining texture emission with this value now, you can see. Well, I'm going to increase that number in a minute, but so it makes even more sense. But you can see that the value of max distance is showing me then from the surface, or from my minimum distance to my maximum distance, which is 1. That being said, I'm just going to show you, but I'm sure you know what it's going to look like. If I were to use a min of 1 and a max of 3, my particles are going to do this. Very simple, okay? So from a value of 1 on the minimum distance, okay? So from the surface away, there's a minimum distance to the maximum of 3. Perfect, okay? So keep in mind that it's three Maya units from the surface, okay? So it's not 3 units from the minimum distance, okay? That's the one thing you need to keep in mind. But if you needed to do, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, but if I were to do something like that and you needed to do some sort of towers of particles, okay, I'm going to let these things run a little for some reason. You needed to do some sort of towers of particles. Okay, from this view, it looks like just like a box, right? But if you combine it with what we were doing before, then you end up with, see if you can probably, well, it's going to be tricky to see, but you end up with this kind of pattern where you have towers of particles. So I don't know, for some reason you needed to do something like that. It's a very easy way. It works with us, obviously, with any shape. And because this geometry can be deformed, okay, it becomes very interesting, okay, once you start adding deformations to these kind of things. So min and max distance, very useful. Tried it in this assignment this week, and I was telling everybody that submitted to the community that the trick is to give a sense of depth. Okay, on those shots where have a lot of particles, okay, or particulate matter for what it's worth. The trick and the successful shots are the ones that have a strong sense of depth. Okay, when you can see layers of particles moving on top of particles, and when you see that the depth is when you really get the most successful results. Okay, so adding to your 3 assignment scenario, adding a bit more of a galaxy around and playing with your depth and pushing things in different distance from the camera is what's going to make it successful. So min and max distance is going to become very handy because at the moment everything you have is probably very flat. Okay, and that's normal for week 1. Now you can start adding some sort of thickness to this. Okay. So that is min and max distance. That is texture emission. I think for now that is good for me. I'm hearing voices here, so I wonder everything right is good. Okay, so that's not in class. That's in my house. All right, cool. Let's keep moving then. So let's start talking a little bit about particles. So I'm actually probably going to stay here for now on this example. I don't need the grid; it's uncomfortable for me. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek at this. I don't know if this is going to be the best example, but let's start moving now towards particles and see what they do. Okay, so particles you saw already a little bit last week. You know that they need to, in order for them to move, they need to have velocity, and that is by default, okay, or at least on the first frame when they're born, is given to them by the emitter. There are other ways, obviously, to add velocity to particles, and that's going to be using fields, and that's probably not for today. But a particle on its own, okay, it's just a container of information, okay, just this. By default, they're points, okay? They're already represented as points. There are many particle types, which we're going to take a look at right now. And particles have a certain rules, okay? Particles, for example, they have a life, okay? Meaning they have a lifespan, okay, a time to live. The one thing in FXCDs need to be careful with is to have particles, everything that we do is always based on efficiency. We don't like to waste resources because we almost all the time run out of resources, okay? They give us stronger machines with more RAM, and what do? We don't go home earlier, we just put more particles in the scene. That's what we do. So efficiency and economy is number 1, okay, for us. So having particles being alive in the scene and floating around in space, if you don't really see them or they don't contribute to your scene in any way, kill them. That's the first thing you do. So be able to control the life of a particle is going to be very important for us. And the particle render types will vary, of course, depending on the kind of effects you're doing. But at the end of the day, it's just the way they look, but the way they move is what is more important to me. A particle has a velocity, of course. Okay, it has a position in space. It has age. It has, in most cases, a radius. Okay, it has opacity. It has mass, it has acceleration. There's a lot of attributes, okay, that a particle will have by default that you can access, and we will access those things over time and then modify their behavior, okay? So if you select your particles, okay, if you go to the particle shape node, that's where all these attributes are going to live, okay? Transform nodes are not good for us in effects, okay? There's nothing to look for on a particle in transform node. Everything is on the shape node. If we take a look at here, we'll see that, well, obviously simple things like is dynamic or not is just like a switch to turn them on or off. Simple as that. Dynamics weight is simply is this thing going to respond to forces, yes or no? So that's a slider that goes from 0 to 1, meaning 100% yes is dynamic. Is that's simple. I mean, I don't tend to touch that one ever. I do play with the conserve, okay? The conserve of a particle is their ability to conserve their momentum or conserve their energy, okay? So, for example, there's also a value that goes from 0 to 1. It will make more sense once we start moving particles. For today, I just tell you that if the value is 1, it means that this particle is never going to lose energy on its own, okay? On its own. Meaning, if you emit this particle with some sort of speed and you leave the conserve at 1 and there's nothing else going on in your scene to that particle, this particle is going to float and move around for eternity. Behaviors found in space, okay, in vacuums and things like that, okay. So it could happen. I mean, I worked on one film, I think just the one film in space. This film Gravity, and it was the first time that I actually had to do simulations with no gravity. And for me, for my brain, I'm so wired into the normal kind of day-to-day simulations that we do. Then having to remove gravity of the situation, of the equation, was so confusing. Okay, in a way, this takes a few tries to get used to do things in a vacuum, right? That's what Conserve will do as well. Okay, so keep an eye on that. So because unless you're working in a scene in space, like I'm saying, if you're working on anything else on Earth or anything else with some sort of realism, you want these particles to lose energy. That's the the idea. That's the tendency. So that value, I will be bugging you a lot throughout the weeks. If that value is 1, is probably wrong. Okay, so that value should be it's very sensitive, and we'll cover it later. But it should never be 1 unless you really, really want this particle to move forever. Okay. Inherent factor is their ability to get the velocity from the emitter itself, but it's different as actually the speed value. Okay, so there's two different things. Speed is what you saw. It's based on the normal of the emitter itself and the value of the speed, and that's going to push a particle away. Inherent factor means if that emitter is actually moving. If I were to animate this plane, for example, okay, if I were to move that plane with some sort of animation, which I won't do because you know how to do it, those particles are able to inherit that velocity from the emitter itself. So not only they could get the speed value that they usually get from the emitter, but if this plane is moving to the right, they will also get a bit of that motion, okay, going through. So that, again, I'm not saying I'm not going to talk about it at all ever, but I'll talk about it when there's proper time for that. I'm going to skip a few things, but the very important stuff, for example, the lifespan of the particle. By default, it's meant to be live forever, which is not good for us. Well, I shouldn't say that. I say in most cases it's not good. Okay, unless you're doing something that obviously has to remain in the scene, then of course you keep it as live forever. But most of the time, okay, you tend to give these particles some sort of life. Okay, and you have 3 different ways. As you can see, you can give them a constant value, meaning that all of them will die at that specific time. Again, I'll cover that a bit later. Random range. Again, you specify a min and a max value, and the particles will live within those 2 numbers. Or you can put an expression, lifespan pp, which is very, very common. We do that very, very often. What I will talk about now is actually more about the particle types. Okay. I'm going to open this menu here. You will see that, I'm going to skip some of these things, of course. Time attributes, collision, soft bodies, we're not going to talk about it yet. Goal weights either, that's in a couple of weeks maybe. So I'm going to skip some of that, and I'm going to go straight to the render attributes, which you can also find on the channel box, which I like to work here better. But hey, well, let's just do something different today. So I'm going to be on this menu. I'm going to open it up, and you will see that there's quite a few particle types. Okay. And what I'm going to do with this actually is going to do a more interesting example with you guys. Okay. Especially, it will still apply. The war assignment is the next thing to do, but well, the information I'm giving you today, I don't think is enough for you to begin. So you can still kind of play with the other assignment today. But what I'll do with you guys is, I'm going to do it from scratch. I'm going to delete these particles here. I'm going to keep this plane. I'm going to show you one more thing missing from the emitters that is very important for the particles. And I already showed you how to use a texture, this texture right here, to pass. To describe areas where the actual emitter is going to work. There's also a way to use a texture to tell the particles which color they should be. Okay, so what I'm going to do with you today is a bit of a quick galaxy. Okay, so you can probably add it to your assignment and start adding color. Okay, that's what I told you last week. I don't care how they look, I don't care how they move, I just care where they are. Done. You think you're doing pretty well with that. Now let's go ahead and put some color and make it a bit more interesting looking. Again, I don't really care for rendering. If you're already familiar with some rendering, or you have a play with that before, or if you're a lighter and you already know that, you have that covered, go ahead and render. I don't mind. But for now, we're going to worry about the emission and the dynamics. So for something like that, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use the checker, of course, because that's not very galaxy-like. I'm going to get rid of it, and what I'm going to do is plug another texture to my emitter. So I'm keeping the surface emitter, but actually I deleted the particle, so there's no point of me doing that. I'm going to emit again from this surface. Let's go ahead and rename this thing Galaxy. Okay, I'm going to close my email. I usually keep it open at the beginning of the class in case one of you guys taking it live has an issue coming in, but we should be okay. Galaxy, this is a surface emitter. Hit create. Special, nothing special happened. But now we're gonna go in here, and I'm gonna do the whole thing with you from scratch. I'm gonna go. If I was you at home, I'm gonna go to Google and I'm gonna say, let's say Galaxy or Galaxy. And I'm going to go into the images. I don't care for the Galaxy of the phone, but I'm going to pick one of these guys. I don't know. Let's pick one that is a bit flatter. This one lacks definition. I think this one will be cool if it's big. Yeah, this is a good picture. So let's grab this one. Okay, it's a full-size image. Perfect. I'm going to save that save it into my project so we keep everything organized. So project, MyoDynamics 1. I'm going to save that onto my source images folder. Doesn't matter where you put it. You just and let's name this Galaxy New because I'm sure I have another one there. Okay, I'm done with that. Let's go and rewind. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this image. I'm going to plug that picture into my emitter. Okay, and where do I'm going to plug it? Well, I'm going to plug it first to my texture rate to describe which areas of this picture the particles are going to come from. First thing you will do probably at home, if I don't tell you, probably you will just do the regular, which is plug a texture. And again, this is a basic Maya behavior thing, so I don't need to explain it, but you're going to plug a file texture, which is the one coming from the one you downloaded. If you don't know this, remember, watch Igor's course on recordings, which is available there already on the website. And I'm sure he'll cover these things. What I'm going to get is I'm going to use Galaxy New, okay, which should be at the very bottom down here. And here it is. So basically, this image has been connected to my texture rate. Okay, like I told you before, I think it's a good idea to plug that into the color of my Lambert. Okay, just to be able to see what I'm dealing with. Okay, so I'm gonna plug it to the color. You see what I mean? Like if you don't plug it, you have no idea, honestly, where this picture is sitting. Now I know. Okay, that's what it's supposed to be. Perfect. So with this image in mind, okay, I can go ahead now and hit emit. I already connected it to the emitter to the actually texture rate, but I didn't enable it. So let's go ahead and enable that. Rewind, hit play, and obviously I need to increase my rate because of this page we're gonna stay here for 2 days. So I'm gonna go really high quickly, something like this. Don't be afraid of using a lot of particles, not a problem. And we have this, which it kinda looks like the picture as far as the positioning of things. You can see the image here. But what I was telling you before at the beginning when I was trying to use the ramp is that Maya is going to take that image and it's going to convert it to a black and white picture itself. Okay, and you can let Maya do those things on your own, but you don't have much control of what's happening. Okay, what is my problem with that scenario where Maya will do it for me? Is that Maya will make some sort of decisions, and what I care for in this picture here is to get particles where really there's color. Where there's black, I don't really need particles. I would like to have that as an empty space. So Maya is trying, as best as it can to do that, but I can see that I still get lots of points in here. It's because just simply those colors in the picture are blues and are not really deep blacks, okay? So that is problematic, and it's not really, I don't really care. Like I was saying before, I don't care for particles floating in mid-space that have no purpose. In an image like this, a color that is similar to black, okay? I know that these colors here might be a bit bluish because of whatever tone that they did to the picture, but I know that those empty spaces, I shouldn't have any particles in there. Rendering a black particle over a black background is a waste, okay? So there's no really need for that. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna, thanks to Maya, thank you for your try, but I'm gonna try myself. I'm gonna open Photoshop. Okay? You can do it in GIMP or any other software you have. I'm going to open that picture, and I'm going to basically, this is basic Photoshop thing. There's nothing special here. But what I'm going to find that image, open it up, and you can basically make sure that these colors are really. But first of all, you can just convert it to, and I'm sure you have many ways to do this. By all means, I'm not an expert here on Photoshop or anything like that. But if you were to just make it a grayscale picture, that's fine. Okay, and probably what I will do to guarantee this thing is just to adjust the levels probably of this thing. So if you were to go in here, I will make sure that whatever is white is really white and whatever is black is really black. You can always, make sure that you increase that contrast a little bit. Doesn't matter if you're forcing it a bit too much. It's just to make sure that you don't really get... Okay, so this image is better for emission than the previous one I had. So I'm going to go ahead and save this thing. Save it as Galaxy New, and I'm going to call it BG or BW for black and white. Perfect. I don't, doesn't matter for me. And I'm done with Photoshop. That's all you need to do for now. And that is the picture that I'm actually going to plug onto my emitter. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go back in here and then just swap it for the other image that I just made. Black and white. And this picture, okay, I'm going to probably, I'm going to keep this open so we don't keep opening that. So I'm going to hide my polygons, rewind and hit play. And now, well, my particles are hidden, so. Hidden particles don't really evaluate correctly, so you always have to rewind and play. And this is much better. My emitter has a bit of velocity, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. I can see because I already can tell because these things are moving, you see. And it has some sort of max distance in there or something. So let me go in and get rid of this speed. Galaxy selected. Yep. So there we go. Let's rewind and try again. It's just easier to see it on one plane. Okay, so this is much better. You could go in and modify it a bit more because I still have a few of these guys here. So I'm not going to do it myself, but what you can do in that case is open in this picture back in Photoshop and make sure you grab a brush with black or something and just paint a bit more and erase those guys over here. Okay, but this is a bit more efficient than what we had before. Okay, so perfect. That is done. So we have some sort of distribution based on that image, which is again right here. But you can see that it kind of complies a bit better. Actually, the points that we're getting here, the particles that we're getting, is because there's some stars. So if you don't want that, again, you can just go in and erase them or paint them black or something. Okay, perfect. So now that's fine. Okay, that's relatively easy. We've done this before. What we haven't done is this. You can pass color from the picture to the particle. That's when it starts getting fun. So I'm going to go back all the way down, and the menu right above it is the particle color. Okay, and you can see that it's also taking an image. So easy. We're just going to click on that. I'm going to make another file, and this time I am going to bring the colorful picture that we picked. Galaxy New. All right. Again, the same thing. You have to make sure that you enable this feature. Okay, so how do you enable the feature? Well, you can see that you have the ability to inherit color or inherit opacity or both. Okay. By default, with an image that doesn't have an alpha channel, there is no point of inheriting opacity because there's no opacity. So the opacity will come from the alpha channel of that picture. So you can plug a TIFF, anything with an alpha channel, and you could also grab that transparency out. In this case, I'm only going to work about the color, but given that the time is coming soon. So inherit the color, you have to turn it on. And nowadays, I'm going to hide this for now, not to spoil the surprise, but before, Maya just didn't say anything else. So you could just go ahead and rewind. And these particles right now, if I leave them as they are, the color is not going to come through. It's because simply you're not doing anything wrong. It's just simply the particles by default, they tend to be as light and simple as possible. Okay, meaning there's many attributes that you can access, but you have to kind of expose them. Okay, in order for you to be able to use them. And that's the way how Maya keeps keeps their speed and keeps everything moving fast as you progressing with your effect. There's no need to turn all the attributes of a particle on if you're not going to use them. So, but again, Maya nowadays, it tells you, listen, fine, you want to use color, but for this color to work, you have to turn it on the particle. There was a message here which I was hiding for now. I'm going to spoil in my surprise. So there you go. So this is the particle shape 1 does not have the attribute RGBPP. Please add it in order for this thing to work. So they're kind enough to say that. Before they didn't say anything. So no problem. How do we do this? Okay, so that's I'm going to leave you with this week. Is how do we add attributes to particles? Okay, like I said, everything happens on the particle shape node. And there's different ways to add attributes. Okay, you can add the default particle attributes that Maya has already created for you. But again, they're not exposed. Okay, they're all turned off and hidden. And you can later, and we will do it many times, we can later add our own custom attributes for things that we're going to need ourselves. Something as trivial as color, opacity, radius, those things are they exist already, and then you just have to turn them on and expose them. Okay, those are very normal type of attributes that you can get. They're so popular, okay, they're so common to use that actually those buttons are outside. Okay, there are a lot more under here, but for today, you can see the opacity and color, because they're so common to use. They put those buttons outside. Okay. We want to pass color, so we need color, right? We just click on it, and this thing comes up. Basically, what they're asking you here, and it's something to start to getting used to, is to think of particles as either individuals or as groups. So you heard me say before, particle system. A particle system is a collection of particles. It's just a group. But sometimes, and from now on, now that we're getting a bit more experience, and little by little, we're going to start accessing particles on an individual basis, okay, or what is called on a per particle basis. Okay, abbreviation for everything that has the double P. Okay, anything that you can, well, there's not too many right now, but you can see down here that this guy says lifespan PP. Anything with the double P stands for per particle. And that's going to apply on an individual basis. So let's say, in an example like this, I have 57,851 particles on my screen right now. You could access each one of them individually because each one of them has a name, what we call a particle ID, a number. So each one of them is unique to each other. And thanks to that number, the particle ID, which we'll see one more time. But again, is the question is going to happen many times in your effect that you're going to do? Are you going to do this on a per particle basis or on a group basis? And that's what they're asking me here. They want to do it on a per object, meaning the entire group. So, for example, let's say that I wanted all my particles in the scene to be red. Okay, I don't need to go and do it on a per particle basis because it's a bit of a waste of time. Why go in particle per particle and put in the color? It's not as bad as it sounds for those who are very, very new to this. You don't really go and paint every particle, of course, but why having Maya calculate the color on a per particle basis if you can just say, hey, grab all of them and make them red? Okay, that's fine. In this case, because you're trying to describe this image, okay, you're trying to get this picture here and replicate it in some way, obviously having a per object color is not really going to work. So I do want to be able to get on a per particle basis, because the way this is going to work, okay, is that a particle is going to be born, okay, on the surface, and by activating this feature on the emitter of inheriting color and turning the color on a per particle basis, okay, on these particles, what's going to happen is these particles are going to look on their position of the position on that plane where they were born. They're going to look at the color of the pixel that corresponds to that position, and that is the color they're going to take. Yeah. So I'm going to be looking at the picture, you know, and say, okay, I'm born in this particular pixel here in this position, and UV number, whatever, and that corresponds to this color, and that's the color that I'm taking. So for something like this, remember, per particle is the way to go. Once I hit add attribute, you will see that on this list, okay, a new attribute is going to appear 9 out of 10 times. The time that it doesn't happen is nothing wrong with you. It's just the display issue, and all you need to do, if you don't see it here, but you know that you did it correctly, just hit this button down here, load attributes. It could have, maybe it happens in front of you guys, right? We'll see, hopefully. But no, it didn't happen. Sometimes it happens, okay? It doesn't appear, no worries. You just go down here, click this a couple of times, and just force the refreshing of the window. But you can see that now RGB PP has appeared, red, green, and blue. Okay, as everything we do in Maya. Okay, so red, green, and blue. That's more of a level 1. I mean, Maya intro to Maya course thing. I'm not going to talk about it. So you get an RGB per particle. There's nothing else I need to do, honestly, for this to work. I don't need to put an expression. I don't need to plug anything. Because the emitter is doing most of the work for me. So now you will think, well, so okay, so let's look at the particles. Are they working? No, of course not. And not only they're not working yet with the color, but actually they turn black. Okay, and this is perfectly normal. If you do what I did, just leave them there in the scene. It's because, remember, well, not remember, I actually haven't talked about this to you yet, but these types of attributes, okay, they get assigned to a particle. So every time you modify their lifespan, their age, their radius, those values, depending on when you want to calculate them, meaning throughout the life of the particle or just when they're born, which is something for later, they have to be assigned to the particle. So just by me turning that on, it doesn't really mean anything. The reason these particles turn black is because now they do have a channel called RGB, and they know that they're expecting some information. And if they're expecting information but I haven't given them anything, they will default to 0, and 0 is equal to black. Okay, that's just a simple explanation. But there's no worries. You just need to rewind, as always, and hit play again, and you will see this. Okay, and that's what I'm gonna leave you with. And I'm gonna, hopefully, those of you who are very new to Maya and Dynamics, and the first time you see this, you'll be impressed, and I hope it makes me happy. But here you can see very complex coloring that you cannot do with an expression. Promise you that. Well, I'm sure there will be some sort of math genius somewhere that will kind of argue with me on this one. But hey, if you're an FXTD normal person like me, then yeah, you cannot do that with an expression. Why would you go and paint something for, if you can just use an image? Sometimes it happens, okay, that the art department in the studio where you work, if the movie requires or the effect requires something as specific as this, they say that this galaxy is the galaxy to do, okay, because you're doing a Stephen Hawking documentary or whatever it is you're doing, you're not going to have to come up with this yourself. They probably the art department or whoever, the designer, the art director will provide you with a picture, an image that they do. They will scan it, okay, and you will get it as a texture that you can log in, because you're an effects artist. You don't need to worry about painting textures and things like that. So you will get an image that will be suitable for what you need, okay? But this is the way you plug it in, and that's the way you display it, okay? Again, this is flat, not very realistic. I was talking about giving a bit of thickness to your effects. No worries. You can do a couple of things. You could deform this yourself, and I'm not very good with this, but if you were to create some sort of non-linear deformer, some sort of like a bend deformer or something, there might be a way to deform it. I'm going to very, very quickly say that you could do that. You could bend this thing, hopefully a little. It's not really bending. Because probably I didn't have selected my geometry. So whatever, you do that one yourself, or you can use the min and max distance like I told you before. You can access it from the channel box as well. So min distance 0, max distance, let's give ourselves a couple of units only just to show you. Again, let's hide this so we don't focus on the particles only. And you can see, if I let it play a little bit, okay, you can see that you have thickness. Okay, it's not that's what I'm saying. You might need to curve it a little, but even if you're going to move your camera around a little bit, okay, it's going to be fine. Like every effect in Maya, okay, not in Maya, like every effect general, no matter where you do the effect, the further you're from the camera, the better it looks. So you can see how better this thing looks like that than going in here, right? It's just the way it is. You'll need more detail if you're going closer to the camera. So that is it for today, because if my recordings get too long, then I have so many problems with Vimeo to upload them, and I'm losing my voice for the next classes. So let's go back in here. All right, let's see what you guys have for questions. I haven't heard a peep from you guys today, so let's see. Is there a way to taper the edges of that effect? Yes, I mean, you can take the image that I'm using, let me open my, here, keep typing the question, guys, don't worry. Yeah, this edge is pretty nasty. It's just because of the picture that I'm using myself. So if you were to go into Photoshop and then you can, paint black a little bit around it, just kind of soften it a little, because you can see here it's not that bad. So if you could get a similar soft edge around this, you can easily do the same. Particles won't be born over there, right? Another thing is going to happen, and we'll talk about it next week, is the opacity of the particles. So you could use an opacity map that makes the particles transparent around the edges. That's another possibility. That's for you, Julius. Any other questions? Shabana, how about you, Rafe, Rodrigo, you had a question, but I think I answered it. That's good. Rodrigo, you can ask me in Spanish if you want as well. Don't worry, I'll translate it for everybody. I know that you're taking the class in English because there's no other choice. Oh, the camera thing. Yeah, that's usually the case. The cameras, as if the further you are, the better it looks. Any effect. because obviously so close, you have to think of other solutions and more particles and more detail. Yeah, if you want to, if you want to travel with a camera inside the galaxy, that probably becomes a different approach. You will go for fluids, or you will go for, I don't know, or you will go for so many particles that yeah, it could happen. Can I make the center of the galaxy thicker and the edges thinner? Yes, you can. Yes, of course you can. And again, it's a gradient. Remember. Oh, you mean okay? No, sorry. I think you mean the max distance of the. I think that's what it means, right? I'm sorry. When I hear thicker, I'm thinking thicker in particle density. But maybe what you mean is just the max distance. Can I change the value? Let me just double check if I'm right. Kind of. Yeah. No, you cannot. Max distance is a value that is constant throughout the surface. But you no. I mean, honestly, with max distance on its own, no. There are obviously many ways to do it. We probably, as we get deeper into the course, we'll do it, because with Mel you can very easily do that. At the end of the day, if you want to experiment yourself before we get to that point, it's just thinking of doing what the max distance does, but doing it with Mel. Just basically putting the particles in a certain position, and you could do what you're suggesting with Mel, which is not too hard. Can I use it with polygons acceptable plane, for example, to make different sizes? Yeah, absolutely. This works with any piece of geometry, even with NURBS as well. So you can use NURBS, you can use polygons. Actually, you can use characters. We will keep using this. Obviously, this is not the end of that conversation, so for sure. Well, if you use velocity, the question Rodrigo is asking me, what happens if I use velocity instead of max distance? You could, but the thing is, you're going to have to figure. I mean, if you want to have a galaxy that is static, okay, let's say that like this galaxy, meaning static, meaning that it's a galaxy that is floating. Okay, when you look at them through the pictures of the telescopes and stuff, you don't see them move, right? They're so far away that you don't really capture any movement. You could accomplish the positioning of the particles with the velocity, but then you're going to have to figure out how to stop them on time. That's why, for example, to give thickness on its own, I suggest max distance, because it's just the one number you have to play with. But yes, you could use velocity as well. But again, velocity will mean that this particle is going to have to be born on the surface and travel certain amount of time. And then what? You can put forces, of course. There's many ways to do it. You're going to have to deal with the particle stopping if you want to have this galaxy in place or something, But yes, absolutely, that is also a valid point. Yes, you can use of course. I mean, you can use speed to simulate the galaxy movement. That is something we'll cover next week, but I know you guys are keen and you're very excited about this thing. So if you grab your particles, we're going to talk about it next week, but if you grab your particles you should be working on dynamics. Just put a little force and have fun with it. Just go feel, and for example, for something like that, you can just use a vortex. Okay, a vortex. I'm not going to work too much on the attributes of this, but remember, these galaxies move very slowly. What I'm going to do here might not be the right thing, but okay, there's motion there. But we're going to have to deal with all the things because these particles keep being emitted. But there is a possibility, as you can see. What about using a volume? A volume what? A volume emitter, or a 3D? I mean, something with thickness, or volume emitters with these textures. Yeah, that's a good one. Good question. You know what? Try yourself this week. You'll see. A bit disappointed. It's not as good because this is first of all, you don't have that option. Okay, if I were to create an emitter, I was gonna let you venture yourself this week for fun, but if you hit create and you go to the attributes, you do have certain things. So yeah, you could use the texture rate will work, but I will let you play with it this week and you will see what it means. It's not as straightforward the look as this, because obviously you will need some sort of three-dimensional image, right? But this is a flat picture. But if you were to use procedural noise or something, you have 3D textures here, so you could use some of these guys. The crater, for example, will work. It will give them some sort of color, right? So if you were to very quickly do this, on a per particle basis. Done. So if you were to grab that, and this is the new emitter, just increase my rate. And I'm going to rewind. I'm going to turn off the original one that I was doing, okay, so we don't get confused. Sorry, that's the particle. So it's dynamic, and you can just turn it off and try the next one. Okay, you can see that. Well, I don't think I plugged it correctly. I plugged it on the wrong attribute. So, well, I didn't turn it on. So no, there you go. So you're picking some colors of this texture. You see, you will have to go in here. You can always play with this, but it's more of an average of this. So three-dimensional volume emitters with this kind of stuff is not that popular. I would rather have myself some sort of shape that that I model myself. So I'm out of a polygon that has UVs and I can map an image to it. It will make more sense. But hey, play with it this week and then you will see what I mean. It's not as cool. Any other questions, guys? I have 2 minutes to jump to my next class, but I think you guys are in good shape. Everything's good. Okay. Well, you guys keep typing, saying that everything's great. I'm glad you guys enjoying the class. This is only week 2. It only gets better from here. Perfect. All right, guys. So thank you for coming. To those of you watching the recording, thank you. Please keep donating. If you wait until the end of this class, you will see a little link where you can click and just contribute to the project. There's a lot more work than I thought it is to do this kind of classes, and it takes so much time to cut them and upload them. It's a lot of work. I didn't expect so much. But anyway, thank you guys for coming, and I will see you next week. Okay, take care.